Welcome to this explainer. Look, we are jumping right in today because we need to talk about something absolutely crucial. Frontline healthcare experience, it isn't just a nice to have on a resume, it is literally the most powerful, underutilized tool in healthcare consultancy. Today, we're going to explore how our lived, hands-on reality on the ward holds the exact keys to fixing the massive systemic problems that pure traditional business consultants miss, literally every single time. So let's step directly onto the floor. Picture this. It's 7:32 p.m. on a Tuesday night in December. I've just handed over 12 highly complex patients to the night shift. My legs are absolutely throbbing. I haven't had a sip of water or, used the bathroom in over 6 hours. I am running on pure adrenaline and whatever is left of my 6 a.m. coffee. And as I walk past the staff board on my way out, desperate to just go home, right? I see this brightly colored, freshly laminated A4 sheet pinned to the corkboard. New Falls Prevention Protocol. Effective immediately. So I stop. I read it. It says a bedside nurse now has to document a safety huddle every 2 hours, do a full environmental check every single shift, and get a physical signature from the charge nurse for any patient getting up unassisted. Now on paper, oh, it looks incredible. It looks accountable, highly evidence-based. But in reality, on a chaotic ward, it is an absolute nightmare. Because what that protocol actually translates to on the floor is 324. That's 27 extra documentation fields per patient per shift. If you've got 12 patients, that is exactly 324 extra clicks in the EHR. It means waking up a confused, exhausted patient at 2 a.m. just to ask, hey, do you feel safe to mobilize? It means the charge nurse, who is, by the way, already covering a sick call and managing a literal crisis in bed 4, now becomes this massive bottleneck just so a patient can use the toilet. You see, no one who wrote that protocol had ever answered a call bell at 3 a.m. while holding a bedpan in one hand and a cold coffee in the other. So Section 1, why top-down systems fail, the disconnect between the boardroom and the ward. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how clearly it shows the root of the problem. Our healthcare system isn't broken because the people working inside it don't care. It's broken because the folks designing the fixes have never actually lived inside the problem. Policymakers sitting in a boardroom, they solve for process. They love checklists, audits, neat little lines of accountability. But clinicians, we solve for flow. We have to keep the floor moving to keep people alive. And that difference between process and flow is monumental. Every new top-down policy consumes one resource above all others, our staff time. And non-clinicians consistently fail to price in the value of that time. Which leads us to this massive phenomenon I see everywhere, the silent veto. When frontline staff hit a rule that's unsafe or just completely unworkable, like our 324-click protocol, they don't escalate it through some formal HR channel. They simply adapt around it to survive the shift. They find workarounds. Ignoring bad rules isn't defiance. It isn't resistance. It is purely survival. But the terrifying side effect here, the real system, the way care is actually being delivered on the ground, becomes completely invisible to leadership. Section 2, the clinician-led advantage. Your experience is the methodology. This is exactly why we need to entirely reframe how we look at systemic change. Those grueling clinical struggles you face daily, they aren't just occupational hazards. The workarounds you invent while holding that bedpan, that is highly valuable untaught consulting data. Think about the unique lens you bring. First, pattern recognition at scale. Seeing the same flawed discharge process 400 times a year isn't an anecdote, it is hardcore data. Second, emotional granularity. You don't just vaguely know handovers fail. You know exactly when they fail. Shift changes under acute stress with specific patients. That's where interventions actually stick. And third, trust is infrastructure. A suit from a big consulting firm walks onto a unit, they get a polite, sanitized meeting. A former charge nurse walks on, they get the raw truth. That trust is your ultimate edge. And look, leaning into this doesn't mean you have to hang up your stethoscope. Becoming a system advisor doesn't mean quitting patient care. Actually, a ton of clinician consultants thrive in a hybrid model. Look at this split, 60% clinical, 40% advisory. This 0.6 to 0.4 ratio, it actually maximizes your credibility. You are literally living inside the system you're trying to fix. That makes your insights razor sharp, and it commands deep respect from both your peers and the C-suite. Section 3, reality versus the paper. Bridging the implementation gap. To really dominate in that advisory space, we have to squarely address this glaring gap between boardroom projections and ward execution. Because let's face a hard truth, hospital pilot programs are often total illusions. Say a new electronic whiteboard system drops. On the pilot ward, works beautifully. Why? Because they get extra IT support, dedicated super users, pristine iPads. But then it hits the real ward. The terminal has a sticky mouse, half the keys are missing, and it takes 90 agonizing seconds just to log in. Guys, in a high-stakes clinical environment, a 90-second login is a death sentence for a policy. Perfect protocols fail the exact second they hit real-world friction. So the only way to fix this is to flip the script entirely. We have to reverse the design process. If you want to know if a new policy will actually work, do not test it on a quiet Tuesday morning with extra staff. Start with the absolute worst shift. Test it on a Sunday night at 2 a.m. with the sickest patient on the unit and the most broken piece of equipment in the hospital. That is your ultimate litmus test. Because if a protocol can survive those conditions, it will work absolutely anywhere. Which brings us to the ultimate boardroom weapon. When you're sitting in one of those committee meetings and some massive, shiny new initiative is being pitched, you only need to ask one single question. Can you show me exactly where and when a frontline worker will do this task differently? If the room goes silent, you have your answer. That silence is diagnostic. It means the policy is a pure abstraction, not a reality. So, how do we put all of this into practice today? Section 4, your action plan. The shadow the decision exercise. Let's move to and see how this builds, because you do not need an MBA or a Six Sigma black belt or a fancy title to start changing the system this week. You already have the tools. It starts with a simple exercise, shadow the decision. Step 1, pick just one frustration you see every shift. Delayed discharges, constant stockouts, whatever. Step 2, follow it upstream. Ask yourself, who actually wrote this policy? What trade-off were they trying to solve? Step 3, distill it into a 3-sentence actionable insight. The policy assumes X. On the ward, we actually see Y. If you changed Z, we could hit the same goal with way less friction. Boom. It is literally that simple to dissect a massive systemic failure. Now, here is the absolutely crucial final step. Take those 3 sentences, put them in an email, and send it to one person above your pay grade. An ops manager, a governance lead. Copy no one else. This is not a reply all rant, okay? There is absolutely zero blame in this email. It is simply an offer of insight. It's highly psychologically safe. You aren't complaining. You aren't filing a grievance. You are consulting. And that email, that's your very first step from the bedside to the boardroom. At the end of the day, the system doesn't change from the top down. It changes when the people who know it best, the ones who've held a patient's hand, caught a falling IV pole, and documented frantically against the clock, finally find the courage to speak. Not louder, not angrier, just clearer. You don't have to leave the bedside to lead. You just have to start naming what you see. That's not activism. That's expertise. And it has been the missing ingredient all along. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Start looking at your next shift not just as patient care, but as pure system data. And I'll see you next time.